Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be learning how to draw the frontal plane of the abdomen for women. I meant to publish this last week, but like I said in my intro video, sometimes I get caught up in schoolwork. However, there will never be a gap of more than a week in between videos. So if I miss a week, don't worry because there will always be something next week. Similar to the last video, I'm going to first analyze the anatomy, then some artist renditions, and then finally some real life models, again from Sketchfab. For the anatomy, I set my picture layer opacity to 38%, and I'm drawing with a dip pen on top. Let's start by replicating the same basic shapes we used last video, including the underwear shape for the lower part of the abdomen and the X shape for the upper part. Here, the basic shape for women doesn't differ that much from men, though I would say the bottom shape is just a little bit wider than the top to create a bit more of a curve between the two shapes, whereas for men they're more similar in size to create a boxier figure. Now for the proportions, they're also pretty similar. The bottom shape starts at the belly button, which is a bit lower, and the upper shape ends at the bottom of the ribs, or about where the body starts to curve outward, and starts at the collarbone. This leaves a nice pocket of space in the middle for the actual abs. I'll now go ahead and annotate the other models. Now let's look at the anatomy. First, we'll note the abs, which are rounder than men's and less rectangular. Instead, they're in a kind of oval shape. Now note that we don't have any super prominent lats or obliques that appear as lines or ridges like they did last video. Instead, we have this slightly more pronounced rib cavity that, like the obliques, still stretch around the body and wrap into the back. Similar to last video though, we still have the lower obliques that form the lower mass that makes the body flare out at the midsection. Now, at first glance, the chest area might seem completely different. However, it still tucks into the biceps and armpits like last video. The only difference now is that you have the breasts, which kind of hang from the chest downward, while the upper chest still has the signature tuck. To better visualize, you can see here that the general shape of the chest doesn't differ that much from last video. Now let me annotate the other figures. Though the lats aren't super prominent, they still exist, which are marked here in yellow, and where the purple rib cavity shape kind of hangs from / wraps into. Now noting general shapes and forms to better grasp the anatomy, observe how the rib cage and the lower obliques form this pocket where the abs should go. From this pocket, the body flares outward, which kind of creates that signature hourglass type shape. However, don't make this too dramatic, otherwise you lose space for vital parts of the body. I'll now demonstrate this on other models. Now we have our basic shapes, our detailed anatomy, and some looser gesture analysis. Looking at an artist study, you can see how the general shape a bit better here, which I'm noting in blue. That same sort of pocket for the abs, flanked by the ribs and the lower obliques. Now the breasts are a kind of teardrop shape coming out from the armpit and bicep. They're not perfectly round or spherical, so don't make that mistake. See also how it fits into the larger chest shape, just like last video. Looking at some different angles, we see how despite their round shape, they still kind of point like teardrops and hang downward from the chest, and again are not perfectly round. Now one last note about proportions and landmarks. The breasts usually hang below the halfway line of the upper egg shape, but that isn't a hard rule. We also still use the belly button as a landmark for the bottom shape, and a center line to maintain the action. I'll note these on a few other figures before moving on to the real life studies. Now we have here 6 models and I'll be drawing on a separate layer on top of them. For this first figure, I'll first start noting the center line. Then sketching in the bottom and top shapes in alignment with the ribs, belly button, and collarbone. Then I split the upper egg shape roughly halfway to make the line for where the breast should hang from. Here, I'm also noting the lower obliques and the upper part of the ribcage to get a better idea of where the ab pocket should go. Here, I'm also making a note of the breasts in purple, which again are just kind of a teardrop shape that hang from the chest, as we mentioned last time. Now I'm going to replicate that myself with a low opacity brush for planning before I pencil in the real thing. I'll do this first one in real time before I speed up the rest as I do the same process. Note for this model, you can distinctly see how the breasts attach to the chest, which still has that line into the muscle of the arm. Though it may seem different from last video, the general structure is still the same. Now that we're done, one more thing about definition. When wanting to add more or less muscle, I usually just add or erase lines of the ab pocket, better outlining it and adding lines to divide the middle into abs, or doing the exact opposite. Anyways, that's all for this video. As usual, timestamps are in the description and citations, and if you have any questions, be sure to ask in the comments below. See you next time!